Hello, this is future Brennan. Before we begin, I'm just letting you know that the episode you're about to hear was recorded several days before we received word that alternate ending co founder Rob Jarasinski has passed away. We will have more to say on the subject on air at a future date, but for now, we hope you enjoy this episode on 2024's In a Violent Nature while we regroup. Please take care of yourselves and each other and keep discovering good movies, one bad movie at a time.
Bring it to Cosmic Diffuser. She's alive! Alive!
Please give a warm welcome to the hosts of
The Bride of
Alternate Ending.
Hello, ghouls and goblins. I don't want to scare anyone, but I'm going to give it to you straight about Jason. His body was never recovered from the lake after he drowned. And if you listen to the old timers in town, they'll tell you he's still out there. Some sort of demented creature, surviving in the wilderness, full grown by now, stalking, stealing what he needs, living off of wild animals and vegetation. He's podcasting. Some folks claim they've even heard him right in this area. Welcome to Bride of Alternate Ending. I am your ghost, Brennan Klein, and with me, as always, is your co-ghost, Tim Brayton. How are you doing today, Tim?
I'm doing good. This month has been very good because it has given you such a confidence in your gimmicky openings.
Thank you.
And I've just been very pleased with the extremely high caliber of your work in these last two episodes. So thank you for that, Brennan.
You know, if there's something that is and should always be associated with the Friday the 13th franchise, it is high caliber work. And so I think that is most fitting. Because yes, this is the second and final episode of our kind of loosely termed Friday the 13th exploitation month. We are covering movies that are kind of toying with the idea of the Friday the 13th franchise and kind of poking at it and kind of being inspired by at least the glut of slashers that came up in the wake of that movie. This movie, much more so, is actually kind of looking at what a Friday the 13th movie is and how it operates more than the first movie that we did, which was Shriek, if you know what I did last Friday the 13th.
Which does indeed have Friday the 13th in the title, so counts.
Exactly.
Not as much as, obviously, this week's episode, or this week's subject, which is In a Violent Nature, a brand new movie, which is out of character for me, because I of course, picked this movie for us to talk about in this episode. And it is a good, sign of why maybe I should stay in my lane and only talk about movies that are at least 80 years old. But we'll get there. We'll get there.
We certainly will, yes. 2024's In a Violent Nature. It is directed and written and directed by Chris Nash. It's a Canadian slasher movie. It is, I mean, if you are unaware, it is described as an ambient slasher. It's kind of the gimmick, or at least the thing that it is being sold upon, is that it is a slasher from the perspective of the killer rather than from the kind of perspective of the prospective teen victims or young adult victims. And it is very much in the vein of a Friday the 13th kind of clone knockoff. It takes place in the woods. It follows this kind of undead killer named Johnny. I don't know if... Well, Johnny's played by Rye Barrett. I think he's the one person I'm going to specifically credit, because this is a lot of actors you don't know, except for... Oh, well, there's one other person I'm going to credit.
There's one other person way, way at the other end of the movie. So I think we'll have to put that person behind the spoiler box. But it is basically, if the Friday the 13th movies, I'd say particularly Friday the 13th 2, 3, and probably not 4, probably just 2 and 3, were kind of put in a blender, and then the camera always followed the perspective of Jason rather than ever breaking away to see what's going on around him. And as you say, it's kind of tough to break this down the way we usually do in terms of who are the characters, what are they doing, what are their names, because to a certain extent, that's not something that we get. Like I was watching the credits and I saw that all of the characters have names,
Hmm.
but I am not at all sure that any of those names were spoken out loud during the running time of the feature itself.
Yeah, I think I got two of the characters' names. There's the kind of like gross guy who could have been a prankster and that kind of never quite came to the fore. But he kind of seemed to be occupying that role. I caught his name and then the final girl's name I got. But beyond that, could have fooled me as to who any of these people are. And that's kind of the point.
Yeah, I was gonna say, to be clear, this is not a complaint per se, because the movie obviously knows it's doing this. Part of what being a Friday the 13th viewed exclusively from Jason's perspective means is that all of the horned up, drug fueled teen weekend shenanigans that make up the first hour of any given Friday the 13th movie, when you think about it, when does Jason see those? And it's like twice when he's standing in the shed watching them from a distance, right? And so that's what we get. We get this kind of scattered handful of moments involving the teens or young adults or whatever they are, that are not provided with any level of context because we don't really know what happened before. We don't really know what happens after. And Johnny doesn't really care. The only reason Johnny's here is because one of the teens, um, in the very, very first shot of the movie, some of the kids arrive at an abandoned fire tower in the woods and find a strange locket hanging on said fire tower. And one of them decides to grab it. And of course, because this is the kind of movie it is, that locket unlocks, as it were, the rotting corpse of Johnny, reanimates him, and he is now going to retrieve that locket no matter what. So he does not care who these people are. So we do not care who these people are. Instead, most of the movie just follows him very laboriously trudging from place to place with his heavy zombie steps, crunching through leaves, crunching on sticks, and when he gets close enough to somebody to sneak up on them, murdering them. And and that gets us through comfortably the first 50 minutes of the film, I would say.
Oh yeah, very very comfortably. And in that kind of description of what you're saying, like I do agree that I think the kind of structure of what the movie looks like and how it operates is kind of those early Friday the 13th, but the way that the killer is definitely those later Paramount Friday the 13th. He's that reanimated Jason. He's that shambling corpse that you don't get until like 6 through 8.
Six, yeah.
And that kind of more supernaturally driven killer where he is also he's kind of territorial. He's kind of it's this weird kind of like revenge driven, but also he just wants the necklace, but also he'll just kill anyone who is in his path. Kind of thing where he's obviously we never hear from the killer. We don't really. He's very vaguely motivated. The way that he kills his MO kind of changes a lot, and that is very consistent with what these movies do. But you never get a sense of why that might be the case or what kind of stimuli he's responding to that kind of change what he's doing, which kind of disappointed me.
I think there is one exception to that, and I don't think we should start talking kills quite yet, but there is one kill that felt very vintage slasher to me in that it was an ironic twist
Mm-hmm,
on
mm-hmm.
the identity of the victim. And I
Yes.
only now realize that I just delivered a pun, but we will talk there when it's
Yes,
time for us to talk about it.
there's a couple where it's like that, but some of them it just felt like we're just doing it just to switch things up for the audience and not. It just it. I mean, I guess maybe let's just get into it. It felt very pointless to me to be doing a movie this way.
It it was I knew this before I started watching the movie, so I can't call it clarifying because it was clear to me before we started. Chris Nash, writer director of this movie, is by trade an effects guy, and he
Hmm.
does makeup effects as part of his portfolio. And knowing that this is the first narrative feature made by a makeup effects guy really makes it clear, I think, why the kills happen the way they do, because it's a showcase, right? It's like
Yes.
we can do this and we can do this and we can do this. And the thing that reminded me of it actually was the other recent highly celebrated throwback to 80s slashers directed by a effects artist, which was Terrifier by Damien Leone.
Hmm.
Um, and I think had a very similar level of the kills are motivated less by what could conceivably be going on in the story or in the killer's brain and more by this is what I wanted to show you that I am capable of doing.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense, but I feel like Art the Clown again, I actually I've not watched the Terrifier movies. I have very little interest in the Terrifier movies. But I feel like Art the Clown, from what I've seen and from what I know about that franchise, is much more of a character who is driven by a sense of like chaos and is having fun with what he's doing. Is does that seem accurate?
That is quite accurate. And that I think is the difference between, the sort of fun psychopath version of a slasher movie and the late stage zombie Jason Friday the 13th, where the killer really is at a certain point in the Friday series just a tank.
Yeah.
And I think this movie is honoring that. And it is tough to say whether I enjoyed that or not because it is honoring something that is not in and of itself good.
Yeah, I mean, look, I don't know if I want to like totally throw my weight behind what you're saying there qualitatively, because I love a lot of the later Friday the 13th, but I do think that it takes on a lot of the tropes of the later Friday the 13th movies without examining them or questioning them, and the only reason to do the movie this way is to force the audience to examine and question these things. um like it does do the thing where it does the same goddamn thing as Jason Takes Manhattan, which I recently watched, where it kind of is simultaneously trying to grapple with the legend of the killer having died as a child and also being an undead adult killer,
Hmm.
and kind of being unable to make sense of any of that. Um, and this is just it's doing the exact same thing, and it's just like, well, why did you do it this way, other than just to pay homage to Friday the 13th? But like, you could have just not, and then we would have an adult killer who makes sense.
Hmm.
It just did that stuff doesn't work for me. It's like that's an homage, and it's like I recognize that, but it kind of damages the movie.
No, it does. And this is a movie that is just so full of conceits, I would say, concepts if we want to be a little bit more generous, ideas if we want to be more generous still. Um, it has a lot of what if this, like what would that do to the fabric of a Friday the 13th movie? But it doesn't really follow through on any of the things it does. So you mentioned that it's being sold as a ambient horror, whatever that phrase means, and also that it's being sold as what if a Friday the 13th story followed Jason exclusively and did not even vaguely follow any of his victims until a certain point when it chooses to do so, which is in and of itself something that I have questions about.
Yes.
But uh, amongst its other things, because I first heard this sold, and I think this speaks to where I get my advertising from versus where you do. I heard this sold as the slow cinema slasher movie. I also heard it made very clear that Chris Nash was taking some inspiration from the filmography of Terrence Malick. So we have a Friday the 13th told from Jason's perspective in the style of slow cinema with images cribbed from Terrence Malick, and it's all ambient. And this is like a lot of stuff, none of which really makes a ton of sense, and it's not clear why, other than let's see what happens. And I don't think let's see what happens is not a valid reason to make artistic choices.
Mm.
But I do think it's a it's a kind of a scatterbrained movie in that it's not actually doing any of those things well.
Yeah, no, I really agree. Like at coming to it as a slasher fan, other than the kills, which we will talk about, I think the kind of examination of the slasher really falls flat. I found it really disappointing. I found it just really baffling in a lot of ways. Um,
Yeah, like I don't know that I mean I think it wants to be. I think it definitely thinks that it's examining the slasher film. So I'm not disagreeing with you on that front. I don't think it is though. I don't think this is an examination of the slasher film. I think it's a recontextualization, I guess. So
yeah,
it's like
yeah, or recontextualization or deconstruction or like whatever it
but
is.
it's not trying to make us think anything new about slasher movies. It's not trying to like change our relationship to the content of a slasher. I mean, it is trying to physically change our like perspective relationship to a slasher movie, but it's not trying to complicate the way we watch a slasher movie. It's really just trying to throw a gimmick at it. And it feels like, to me, it feels like a gimmick. And sometimes this is actually, it's fun and it's cool and it works. The one thing that I did think was kind of fun in that sense was when we get the cryptic, creepy campfire backstory of Johnny. Uh, it's done in this kind of really, it's a stereotypical, the kids are sitting around and one of them knows an impossible amount about the backstory of this franchise sort of scene. And it's kind of neat to wander into one of those kind of in the middle from the killer's perspective. And that's like a scene that I think was neat, but is it a scene that's doing anything? It's really sort of not. It's just kind of a scene that's like, oh, well, that's a neat idea. And that's where this movie lives is, oh, well, that was an idea, but not a film that really is using those ideas to push anything forward, I don't think.
Yeah, I don't know. And that scene I thought kind of broke the format in a way that I found really frustrating because I found because he does wander into that sequence, but then the camera very much leaves his perspective and starts just kind of circling around the campfire so we can really just listen to the kids talk for a while and look at all their faces. Um
I
which
will I will say that my positive feelings toward that scene could indeed be motivated by the fact that at this point in the movie I was ungodly thrilled to be looking at a human face, but we'll talk about that too.
yeah, see that's the thing because it's like I felt that way too. It was like, oh, there's characters and there's faces and there's stuff like that. But it also felt like a violation of
It was a violation of something that I didn't like, so I don't mind it as much.
yeah. I don't know. It just
Let's 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 talk about it. How many of this film's 94 minutes consist of looking at Johnny's back?
so many
It's gotta be a third of them.
probably
Maybe a half.
just tromping through the woods.
We just it's there are all these tracking shots following him, like these dorsal tracking shots, just watching his back. He's walking, we're walking. I don't think they're steady cam, maybe some of them are steady cam. Um, and that's it. Like when it's like this is a slasher movie from Johnny's perspective, they mean it in the very literal sense of like you're watching a video game, like a third person video game character marching around a landscape, and you're just gonna follow and follow and follow. And it's like this is nothing to me. This was like such a it was such a choice, and I love it when filmmakers really dive in and do choices and commit to them. But it was yielding no experience to me as a viewer that I found even frustrating. Well, it was frustrating, but it's like it wasn't doing anything. It was literally just like we had an idea and we are going to stick with it unless we
Yeah,
don't.
yeah. And I feel like it was honestly either too much or not enough. Because I don't feel like there it was. I look. I would never argue for more boring stuff in movies. I know you would in a lot of cases.
This,
But
including the case of this movie, to be clear.
okay, great. Because like I don't feel like there was enough of it to build up a rhythm where the horror moments really kind of like felt like they were building to a crescendo. In this kind of like you're finally drawing a breath after like these kind of like long moments of pause in between them. Um, it just kind of they were long and boring, but they weren't long and boring enough that the
Hmm.
the big moments felt explosive. So I don't know. It just yeah, it was just kind of a waste of time.
And to your point about boring, like I encountered this movie through the phrase slow cinema slasher, and as someone who collects slasher films, even if I can't always say that I'm a big fan of them, and someone who is quite a big fan of slow cinema, that got me curious. I still like that pitch. I still want to see a slow cinema slasher film, which this isn't. I don't think. I think it is aware that slow cinema means nothing is happening in real time, but it's real confused about why a filmmaker would do that or how to commit to it. And so I think that's exactly the case. Like we get just enough of Johnny walking around in the woods for it to be like this is just a lot of a guy walking around in the woods, but not enough for it to kind of cross the bridge into I am now kind of entering a dissociative philosophical state because all I've been doing for 8 minutes is watching a guy tromping around in the woods. Because it isn't long enough to actually like generate anything from its length. It's just kind of slowing the movie down and not providing us much of anything to look at. And even in a slow cinema film, like the most austere art film, we're gonna get more than one kind of shot. And we only get one kind of shot in this film. And it cheats with those kinds of shots too, because it's like we're gonna follow Johnny walking through this woods for 8 minutes. But then in those 8 minutes, there's like seven cuts. So it's like actually several hours later. So it's not even good at like making us feel like we're just stuck there in the woods with this guy.
Yeah. No, just yeah, all of that just is very bland. It's very disappointing. Um I feel like there is stuff that I think does work within that kind of maybe not the slow cinema milieu, but the kind of the thing that it's trying to do, the ambient whatever that the vibe it's trying to create. The at least I think some of the ways that it is distanced from the material I think does work. I think that there are two. I'm going to start talking about the kills a little bit. I
Okay.
think that there are two kills in particular that are two of the less violent kills, that are kind of at a distance and that kind of blend the idea of the brutality of nature and the tranquility of nature like kind of simultaneously. So I'm thinking specifically of this kind of like wide shot of the lake when Johnny is drowning a girl who is swimming in the lake. And you are getting mainly just she gets dragged under the water really quickly, so you're just getting the kind of like tranquil top of the lake, and she briefly will come up for air and scream in these like short little clipped bursts of noise, but then otherwise it's still just this quiet still shot of a serene lake. And then the other shot that I'm thinking of is this kind of bird's eye view of Johnny kind of tromping after these two, like this one injured guy and a guy that's
Hmm.
trying to help him out. And he's just walking after them, and he kind of silently and swiftly throws an axe and dispatches one of them. And you don't
Yes.
actually know that this has happened until the tracking shot from above kind of follows the action far enough for you to see that. But you're mainly getting like kind of bird noises and tree noises and bug noises while this is happening. Um, and I thought that both of those were really effective.
Yeah, you've actually just mentioned two of the best moments in this film, I think. And certainly in the latter case, like it's a very cool reveal, as you said. We sort of don't understand how the one character has died until the camera tracks over his body and we see an axe handle sticking out of his head, which is really, clever, and I think it uses the frame in an interesting way. And also, good golly Moses, it's a shot that's following Johnny from a perspective that is not 10 feet behind his head.
Yeah,
So I
ain't that
think that's
nice?
part of why that moment got me excited.
Mm.
But the river or the lake moment you talk about is, I think, in my probably top three or four moments in this whole film, partially for what you said. And I think it's the one time, maybe there are two times, when it actually gets at what slow cinema is good at, or at least a kind of slowness, if not slow cinema, like with a capital S and C.
Hmm.
Um, which is that long stretch where there's just a shot of the surface of the water, and we're not quite clear, is she dead? Is she still struggling? Where is Johnny? And it's not like minutes long. I mean, it feels long in the context of where we are in that moment, but it's probably only about 15 seconds or so. But then her body just rises out of the water, and we just see her
Hmm.
kind of like float there. That to me is a great moment, really tense. One of the few moments in this film that I think is actually kind of working as genre film in terms of like the emotions it's stirring up in me rather than just like the kind of narrative mechanics of genre films. And then the camera just kind of at first it seems arbitrarily starts to pan to the right, and then we realize that we're tracking with Johnny as he's walking out of the water, and we see his head in this vintage firefighter mask just kind of rise out of the water. And that whole shot to me was among the best things this film had to offer. So I'm glad that you singled it out and that you also liked it.
Yeah, thank you. And yeah, I think in general, like I think that this movie is better at examining nature through the lens of a slasher movie than vice versa. And I think that's where it gets its title. And I thought that was interesting, and I wasn't really expecting that.
Yeah.
Um,
And I mean, and I think that's maybe why he gets off saying that he was inspired by Terrence Malick, which otherwise I think is a nonsensical thing to say in the context of this movie. But yes, it is very much about a tranquil nature being interrupted by a genre film. And that's again, it's an idea. I like the idea. Do I like the movies playing with that idea? Maybe yes, maybe no. Maybe sometimes.
yeah, fair enough. Um, since we've broken the glass on the kills, do we talk about them as a whole? Do you wanna dive in?
I want to put them off for one more
Okay.
second because there's one other moment I want to talk about that I was curious what your thoughts were. It's the opening shot of the movie,
Oh,
and it
okay.
immediately because it's related to the slowness, to the I'm an art director, but am I? Uh, I just immediately got bad vibes off the movie from the opening shot, which is we're staring at like the structure of the fire tower where the necklace has been hung, but we're not looking at the necklace yet. The camera will eventually pan over to reveal the necklace. So we're basically just seeing like chunks of metal with grass behind them, and we hear characters talking off screen, and that's it. And it's clearly meant to be this kind of like artful moment. There's no one to latch onto his perspective yet because Johnny hasn't been resurrected. We aren't aligning with any of the characters, so we're sort of not aligning with them. And it felt to me like this instant sinking feeling in my gut of like, oh, this is what you think art movies are, is this. And it's just so shapeless and dull. And I just immediately like the movie's already making me feel like I my expectations were set way too high for this. 'Cause I was like, that's why I picked this movie. I was excited for it, and then right off the jump, it's like here is this kind of hapless attempt to do slow, and it's like, oh, this is not working for me. This is just random junk being kind of swizzled together.
Yeah, no, I'm really, I mean, I'm interested to hear that perspective from you because I do not have the grounding in slow cinema that you do because I do not have the patience for it. So I saw that and I was like, yep, gross, moving on. And it that's just I didn't think, oh well, this isn't how Bellatar would do it, because I haven't sat through the Turin horse or whatever, so
And I mean, I don't want to
or
say that it's
Satan
bad because
Tango.
I don't want to say it's bad because it's not how Bellatar would have made it, but I think it is. Again, this is a movie that's primarily about its like ideas. It's primarily a movie of if we took A and B and incongruously shove them together, what C emerges. Like that's the movie. That's it. That's all it's doing. And just to get that sense of like, oh, you don't know what you're doing. Like you don't actually know B well enough to cram it together with anything. And you know slasher movies. He has a better handle, I think, on slasher movies than art cinema. He's just not making a good slasher movie.
Uh-huh.
But like he actually, I think, doesn't have a handle on art cinema.
Yeah, no, I totally hear that. Like I think yeah, clearly this filmmaker Mr. Chris Nash, he definitely knows the ins and outs of slashers. Like to the point that like the final girl, she does have a name and it is a gender neutral name. Her name is Chris. And that shows like you've watched a lot of these movies. You know what's
Hmm.
going on with like how they operate like very intimately. You just don't necessarily know how to wield that information. But like there is also like there is a little bit of like a Tommy Jarvis moment later on,
Hmm.
very
Hmm.
briefly. There is all of that stuff, but there is maybe not so much of the Terrence Malick material that you're seeing here, even if they were trying for it.
Oh yeah. But shall we talk about kills? Because as you say, he does grasp slasher cinema, even if it is not, I think inherently cannot be a great slasher film because he's in part trying to blow up a slasher film from the inside, and so it's going to be unsatisfying in certain ways. But one of those ways is not the kill sequences. The kill sequences are, I think there are two things. They're very excerptable. They're like not, it feels like they are all breaking the movie apart and like wrecking its rules. And I think that works because the whole point of violent disruptions. So the fact that all the rules the film has set for itself, the weird behind the back shots like go away, perspective is no longer a thing. Um, so it makes sense. So they are that. They're a disruption to the film. And two, they are grody as all hell,
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
which I liked. So
Oh,
what are your thoughts on the kill sequences?
I mean, in a vacuum, like there are some really awesome kills in this movie. And I will say, like, I've been complaining a lot. I gave this movie a 7 out of 10. I did enjoy it, like, in the aggregate. Even some of the stuff I have been complaining about, I mostly, even the stuff I found boring, like, I mostly found it to be, like, a watchable movie overall. But I think the kills are the part, like, definitely, especially divorced from context, where I was just like, hell yeah, like, this is a reason to be watching this movie.
I will say that I was in the place. I wasn't quite as high on it as you. I do think it was watchable. I think that even though the ideas aren't working, they are working well enough to keep me interested.
Yeah.
It's a movie that even though I don't think it's coming together, I enjoy pulling at the pieces that aren't together just to see why they didn't come together.
Yeah.
Uh, and the kill sequences were awesome enough that I was willing to be like, okay, I'm on this movie's side. I wish it were better, but it is good. It is watchable. And about 70 minutes into the film, I was confidently at a 3 stars. And the only thing that could possibly move me down was if it just flailing projectile diarrhea shat the bed in its last 20 minutes. Spoiler alert, I did not give this movie 3 stars, and we'll talk about those last 20 minutes. But yes, the kills are outstanding. Let's not bury the kills yet.
Yes, let's certainly not. There are, I mean, even so, what is one of the first kills? Like probably the first kill of the kind of like main core group of young people. It's a pretty gnarly kill, and I was like, oh hell yeah, this is great. And I did not realize that we had much better kills to come, or
Oh yeah,
certain.
no, it's great because it's both the promise of I have really good makeup effects in my kit, plus you ain't seen nothing yet, baby.
Yeah,
And also, I think, and tell me, we're talking about the one where the jaw cut.
yeah, yeah.
Uh, felt a little bit like it was in homage to the only good kill from Friday the 13th Part 5 to me. The
Oh,
one where the guy gets his head tied to a tree so hard that his skull cracks.
oh, totally. I mean, I was, yeah, no, totally. I mean, I was getting also shades of Crazy Ralph getting garroted in part two,
Sure.
just because that also involves a tree. But just Friday the 13th vibes in general.
Yeah, again, he knows it's Friday the 13th. You can't say that he doesn't know it's Friday the 13th.
No, certainly not. But no, this is a kid from behind a tree gets a machete kind of like laterally through his mouth, and it kind of chops off the upper 2/3 of his head,
It
and
it
is
it, it doesn't kind of do that. It very vividly on screen has the top third of his head fall off of the bottom. I guess 2/3 of his head fall off the bottom third
oh
at the
yeah,
jaw. And
it's
it pleased me specifically because it reminded me of, I think, a formative moment in me beginning to enjoy gore effects per se, which came at a slightly later age for me than it would typically come for a lot of gorehounds.
okay.
Um, but the, I believe, 1997 movie Ghost Ship, I think 97,
Oh,
late 90s.
no, the I think it's like early 2000s. Are you talking about the
Is
Dark
it early
Castle one
2000?
with like Emily Browning or whatever?
I've never seen it. I've only seen the opening scene, is the
Oh,
thing.
with the big wire.
With the big wire.
Yeah, that's like oh
It, it,
three, I
it, it,
think.
It
It's
had to have
'02.
been
It's
before I was in
2002.
college. Is it really?
Yeah, it's 2002.
That cannot. My personal narrative has to be wrong then. Because I thought for sure I saw that before I went to college. It is 2002. Huh. Well, I was already watching gory movies by then, so I don't know. But I wandered into the room while that was playing on cable, saw that opening scene where everybody's head gets bisected by a wire, and ever since that moment, I've always enjoyed a good head bisection or
Oh
any
yeah.
sort of bisection, but particularly head dissections. And got about 3 minutes into Ghost Ship and was like, "This is crap. I'm not going to watch." I've never revisited the film since that moment,
Oh yeah, don't.
but enough to tickle me when I see it pop up.
Oh yeah, no, that's it's really good. It knows what it's doing. And yeah, and there's another great kill. I mean, there's one of the great kills in this movie. Like it
There,
is.
I would say there are three great big look at me, I have gore effects, I can do crazy shit level kills. But even the ones that are not like necessarily super cool showcases for the makeup team,
Mhm.
like we talked about the one where we just pan over a body and we see that he threw an axe in the guy's head. That's a pretty great moment, even
Yeah.
though it is not a quote unquote great kill.
Yeah, the non-gory kills are still moments that the filmmaking comes alive.
Hmm.
I would say of the three big show-stopping gore kills, one I find to be a pretty kind of wasted opportunity, which is the kind of wood chopper kill.
Yes.
Um, should we dive into that one?
Let's go ahead and dive into that one because obviously we want to save the best for last.
Yeah,
And I'm sure we agree on what the best is. How could you
yeah,
possibly not?
yeah. That's the one that I was describing as just one of the great kills in slasher cinema. Like the reason this was maybe a seven and not a six for me. But yeah, so like there's a wood chopping machine where there's this kind of I've never seen a machine like this before, but it's kind of this long. Is this something you're familiar with? Um,
No, the Wikipedia page, which I was extensively relying on because it's the only way to figure out which character is which, refers to it as a log splitter.
Log splitter. Okay, so it's this. You clearly you have a log that's kind of
That's
chopped
in dire
and
need of being split, so you run it through a log splitter.
yeah. So it's basically like a mechanical thing that has an axe that kind of descends upon a log and splits it in half on this kind of
Hmm.
like long conveyor belt kind of thing. But yeah, so there's a park ranger that gets dispatched via this machine, and it's just like it. This is a moment that I think it could have become a slow cinema kill, and it kind of bails out on that idea in a way that I found really disappointing. Um, and it just doesn't really make any sense the way that it plays out. Uh,
Are you referring to because he starts the kill by fracturing the ranger's neck, so the ranger is paralyzed, and so he doesn't really do anything besides get chopped apart?
well, not necessarily. So what I mean, because that I guess kind of explains why he's not moving. But like he starts with his hand, like he chops off his hand with the wood thing. It's like, ooh, that's gross, that's cool. And then he chops off his head, and then we're done. And it's just like, oh,
Oh, so you're saying why not dismember the whole entire body?
yeah, kind of. Like because it is this like really methodical because it takes a long time for this chopper to do its thing. And you're seeing this pool of blood like slowly spread beneath this guy's body as he's lying there. And it is that when the hand is being cut, that part's like really intense and kind of gross and kind of neat. And obviously, so there is a piece of wood loaded in the machine already. So he does, I guess, ostensibly to clear the machine, operates it. So obviously, you, the audience, can see how the machine works before a
Hmm.
body is put into it. Um, and it's going really slowly down towards him and through him, so it's kind of building this tension. And I think it could have been more methodical and more just done a little more, but it just kind of cuts itself short in a way that felt
I
kind
can
of
I can see
random.
that, and certainly if the if the quibble here as has been my quibble, is that why isn't this more attentive to the needs of slow art cinema? Yes, a sequence where he piece by piece chops the ranger apart would have been pretty great and would have really just made us sit there contemplating what must a slasher movie killer go through in order to do all these baroque things. Like he's just sitting there in a kind of tedious way, chopping a body apart.
Hmm.
In as much as the kill scenes in this film are actually fun to
Yeah.
watch,
Yeah.
I think the returns would have started diminishing really, really hard if we just were like, oh, and now he's on the second leg. Cool. Just because like as you say, it is slow, and at a certain point, like we get it. And I think it takes a hand to get it.
Yeah, I do agree with you, but other once the hand was done, I kind of was like, I don't know. I don't know that the kill was like impressive enough to me on its own that I felt satisfied by it anyway, necessarily. So I kind of wanted it to just be something else, maybe.
That's fair. I guess, and I think that is a very valid response to it. I think to me, the magic trick of it on the filmmaking side was when does the actor's body get replaced by the dummy whose head is removed?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And I think that to me is kind of what the kill was actually about, more so than the log splitter itself. And I
Okay.
like that part of it. I like that part of it. But I can also see where that would not have been what rang your bells.
Yeah, no, that's
It
totally
is
fair.
it is certainly an anticlimax in terms of it is the third of these super gory kills, and the second of these super gory kills is just a masterpiece.
Yeah,
I don't know how else to describe it.
let's talk about it.
So one of the characters, the blonde, I think that is the farthest I can go
Yoga
into
blonde
describing her.
who
Yoga
is
blonde
queer in some way, who's just
in
interested in one of the other ladies.
in some capacity is queer. Uh the lady she is interested in is the one who died in that very splendid drowning sequence. So Yoga Blonde is out doing yoga and thinks that the girl she's been hitting on has come to see her, but it is in fact Johnny. And the one quibble I do have is that we're all familiar with the phenomenon of the why aren't you just running away from him kill in a slasher movie? But this one seems to really exceptionally amplify it, that she's just kind of standing there watching until he kills her. Uh, Whatever.
Well, she's on a
So
cliff, like she can't run backwards.
she can run laterally though.
I mean, yeah, that's true.
Uh, I think this is also the one moment in the film we haven't touched on this. The one moment on the film that felt a little hollow to me because there is not a snip of music,
Hmm.
of non-diegetic music. There's no score here. Uh, and I think what really came to my attention in this moment was one of the reasons I buy I'll just stand here and scream rather than run is because the music is kind of freezing time and making time into this like little horrifying moment. And in the absence of music, I'm literally just watching a character kind of stare at the killer for like a
Yeah,
minute. But so he shows up, he walks towards her, and he helps her with her yoga.
he
Is what
does.
he does, Brennan. That's the one thematically on point kill in this movie is he helps her stretch.
Yeah. So he has these two like hook things that are connected by a chain. Are they supposed to be like firefighting implements
I
or
I
like
think you
mountain
use them
climbing?
to I think you use them to drag logs
Okay, okay. Um, but yeah, so he punches a hole through her tummy,
with the hook.
with the hook, and he uses the other hook to slam through her skull, and then using the chains, he drags her head through the hole he has conveniently made through her tummy, and kind of makes ties her into a little garlic knot.
Basically,
It's
very slowly. This is taking place over. I don't know. I didn't time it. I was too in the moment to want to stop and look at a time code, but gotta be 2 minutes,
maybe, yeah, it is.
90 seconds for sure.
Yeah, it's really elaborate. It is this beautiful like balloon animal yoga pose,
And and
gruesome.
as ridiculous and cartoony as the moment is, really wants to make sure that you are aware of how much pressure would have to be exerted on a human skeletal structure to cause it to bend that way.
Oh
Because it
yeah.
reminds me of there's a murder scene in the Alfred Hitchcock movie Torn Curtain where the gimmick of the murder was basically Hitchcock feeling deaths in movies are too easy and the killer just like stabs you in the gut and you die. An actual death, like to kill someone, is extremely hard work and laborious, and the person is dying slowly enough that they can fight back, and it would just be this ugly, messy experience. And it's a short death, like he puts the hook in her head and she's done. But the amount of exertion it takes to crack a spine and bend it in under itself, like I feel that in this moment, and good for the movie.
Yeah. No, and it's this glorious, creative, beautiful kill that is just very fun to reflect on and
It's
ponder.
very fun. The dummy of the blonde's head that pops through her stomach and out of her backside is delightful. And also, this moment has we other one of the other things we haven't touched on in terms of you made a choice. I don't know why you made it, but you made it. This whole movie is in Academy ratio, 1.33 by 1. Um, don't know why, but it is. And
Because Robert Eggers does it.
I mean, okay, that's actually probably as close to right as any speculation could be. Definitely feels like a movie that is like, what if we what if we elevated horror to the shit out of a grody slasher film? And I think that's one of the ways. Uh the only shot in this entire motion picture that I felt used that aspect ratio in a genuinely compelling way, one of the only shots that I think actually got at why slow cinema. After he has killed her, he kicks her body down. You said she's at the edge of a cliff, which is almost true. She's actually at the edge of a very steep hill. So he presses her body down the steep hill and it rolls down the steep hill all the way into the lake at the bottom of the hill. And we are watching this in this massively wide shot where the hill is basically crossing the screen from upper left to bottom right. And we just sit there watching this tiny little ant prick of a body. Like we can't really make out the details, just rolls and slides and flops and then makes a little splash and sinks below the body of the water. That was notwithstanding the kill itself, that was far and away my favorite artistic thing that happens in this movie is that shot.
Yeah, the sound design is indescribably gruesome. And also like this whole kill, and in addition to being like grotesque and kind of horrifying and gruesome, it's also a little funny. Like it's got a kind of wry sense of humor to it, and the movie does have a couple moments that are a little funny. Like it does have the a lightness to it that does happen from time to time that is nice.
I mean, it's definitely funny in this scene. It definitely has a lightness. It's not clear to me that it's not a parody, if
Hmm.
that makes sense. So in as much as this movie is just making a bunch of choices and wants to be a bunch of things and isn't really good at any of them or following through on any of them, I do think there are places where it feels like, was this supposed to be a parody? Was this supposed to be kind of accentuating the ridiculousness of the thing you're doing? Uh, the yoga kill is for sure one. I think sort of the moment where the fake Tommy Jarvis shows up and like immediately goes on this big like climactic rant about like the one time we met in the past. Like there are places where it feels ridiculous enough that I think maybe the point is that it's supposed to be a parody, but again, it's just not. It's just not.
Yeah, no, it's not. But I am curious. So I mean, to the idea of like whether or not it's a parody or satire, what do you make of it being set in the modern day as opposed to the 1980s?
I mean, I guess I didn't really think of it in those terms, insofar as none of the Friday the 13th is a period piece.
Hmm.
So I wouldn't have anticipated that this would be, and it's set in the modern day unobtrusively,
Yeah,
I
that's fair.
think.
But I mean, they do have like they have iPhones canonically. Like they take a selfie, and then there is like a line that's like very jangly and weird about like cancel culture doesn't exist. You're being an ableist, and I'm like, I don't think you know what those words mean. But yeah, other than that, it feels pretty timeless.
I mean, I took that very jangly bad line to be more of a shorthand for like let's pin down some stereotypes real quick, which of course is what slasher movies do as well. But
Hmm.
yeah, badly written line. But again, would this movie benefit from having well written dialogue? I don't know that it would. Uh, it doesn't make the dialogue good, but yeah, it sort of just kind of washed over me. But it sounds like it did kind of stick in your craw a little bit that this was set in the modern day.
No, I don't know that I was upset by it, but I was just a little surprised by it, or at least like I would have expected it to be 80s, just considering kind of where all of the artistic impulses of this movie were coming from. Um, so I just thought it was interesting that they didn't try to go for that just whole hog. But no, I just thought it was neat. I could use more slashers set in the modern day. Um,
For
and
sure.
yeah,
And yet you don't want to watch Terrifier.
you know, I have my limits.
I will I will say In a Violent Nature has made me feel like I terribly underrated Terrifier because Terrifier has a lot of the same impulses this movie does, but is more disciplined and unified.
Can we? Well, I'm thinking of Terrifier 2 also, and can we call a 2.5 hour movie disciplined?
I'm not talking about Terrifier 2, I am talking about Terrifier 1.
Yep, fair enough. Yeah. Anyway,
No,
so
Terrifier 2 I immediately cottoned to. Terrifier 1 I did not.
yes, 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 yes. Fair enough. But yeah, so that's kind of what we're looking at, and we've lifted the spoiler veil quite a bit, but now we have to fully draw it back because we have to talk about that fucking final 20 minutes. Because what on God's green
Oh
earth were they
my
thinking?
God. So we get to the Tommy Jarvis and we get to this like old ranger station and it's night and we still have two of the kids alive and the ranger shows up. And it's like it's still playing by the rules more or less. Like it's kind of switching up the way it's shooting scenes, but it's still basically like if Johnny's not there, we aren't there. And then at a certain point we just pivot over to the final girl. You caught her name. I didn't.
It is Chris, yes.
It is Chris. Yes, that's right. Uh,
Just like
Chris.
Chris Higgins from Friday 3.
There you go. So Chris puts the necklace on a can of gas very, very carefully in a very close shot. Clearly trying to be like, I will bait Johnny. I will distract him by putting his locket here, and then I will make my escape. And then she does so. And then the movie's done because we don't actually see Johnny again after that shot, I don't believe.
We don't.
And then she runs out of the woods and she hitches the ride with this movie's version of a big fancy guest star.
Mm-hmm.
And not that I want to diminish the fact that it does have a fancy guest star in the form of Lauren Taylor, who is from Friday the 13th, Part 2. But if you'd asked me that question, in what movie have I seen Lauren Taylor, I would have been like, oh. So,
Fair enough. But yes, she plays the character who tries very much to get with Mark, who is the kid in the wheelchair, and she goes to change her underwear. She changes into that very gross brown underwear.
that's right.
And Jason stabs her, and she very much is leaning against a wall and does not move while he approaches her with a knife.
Yes.
She is
But
also
still, good callback, and that's cool. But she's also what?
she's also in the 1984 slasher Girls' Night Out.
I have not even heard of the 1984 slasher Girls Night Out.
It is a movie that is like both very misogynistic and deeply homoerotic, which are not mutually exclusive. But it also features Ratanya Alda from Mommy Dearest.
Okay. I will keep it on my long list.
And it features very frequently the song Yummy, 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 I've Got Love in My Tummy.
Okay, that might be enough to put it on the short list.
Yeah. Anyway, it's a fascinating movie. The killer is dressed in a bear mascot costume, and it's like got 4 like steak knives coming out of the paw.
That's pretty great.
Yeah. Um,
You know what we immediately stopped talking about the nanosecond I introduced it?
the ending.
The ending.
Oh my god, yes. Okay, so yes, Lauren Marie Taylor, she kind of I don't even want to say stopped acting because maybe she never started acting. Her career never really materialized for her, but in recent years she has kind of been taking on a couple roles that have been honoring her appearances in 80s slashers. I believe she was participated in Friday the 13th the game a little bit. She appeared in those like kind of upscale fan. She appeared in the sequel to the kind of upscale fan movie Never Hike Alone. Like that has kind of taken on a life of its own. I haven't seen it because I really don't give fan movies the time of day.
Amen, brother.
Yeah. But those ones seem to get attention outside of the fan movie sphere.
Yeah, no, that specifics, the first one at least, is like the slasher fan movie that people respect, which I I don't want to open that rabbit hole and
Yeah,
crawl into
exactly.
it.
No, thank you. But yeah, so this is, it is a cameo that I thought was neat, and I think she acquits herself quite well. But it is an absolutely useless character who drones on and on and on about nothing for 15 minutes.
Here's the thing. If it is Chris escapes meets a slasher movie star of yore, the slasher movie star is like, well, they sure seem to have something. And then we see the truck drive off, and the whole thing lasted 90 seconds.
Uh-huh.
I'd be like, aha, what a cunning ending to finally break away from the perspective of Johnny and to bring in a cameo of a slasher movie star of yore. Teehee, how clever. It's so fucking long.
Yeah.
It's so fucking long, Brennan. She's talking about the time her brother got eaten by a bear for like an hour.
Yeah, and it's like clearly meant to try and highlight the whole like, why do people kill? Are we animals? Blah blah blah. Nature kind of metaphor of the movie. No, thank you.
Hey, had that previously been the metaphor of the movie?
Not really. Like I said, I think it is the most. I think the violence of nature is the most effective thing that the movie is evoking as a tone, but I don't think it is ever the point of the movie. And then all of a sudden, this monologue really wants you to think it is.
And it's just like, oh God, it's so protracted and it keeps making the same points, and I hated it. I
Yeah,
hated it so hard. And I hated it both because it was boring, but also because whatever this movie had been doing, like all of its chaos of ideas and like, what if we tried this and what if we tried that? None of it is being activated anywhere in this entire 2 reels of
yeah,
the movie.
yeah. It has been completely discarded in favor of this entirely new thing that is just not working. And I think I mean, I don't know exactly how they accomplished the driving sequences, but it seems like it was probably green screen and probably not very good green screen. Because it looks really weird outside the windows, and you're just staring at it.
I was not able to keep my eyes on screen tightly enough to begin making evaluations about what was going on. This is the point in the movie when I was like, I'm at home and I own a phone. What can we do with that?
No, well, I was just like, my eyes were
Or straight
like,
up, I own a laptop. Maybe I should go to the Wikipedia page and see who the characters are.
my God. But I was just like, I feel like my eyes were like losing focus. I was like, I can't, I was looking at the screen the whole time and couldn't keep my eyes focused on the images on the screen.
It's a shot of her face talking for just minutes at a time. They're like the longest shots in the whole movie.
Yeah, no, it is brutal. It is useless. And also, I'm so sorry, Lauren Marie Taylor. Like I said, I do think you do a pretty good job at delivering the world's worst monologue, or at least the most useless and least motivated. But You do one of my biggest pet peeves, which is when you're driving, lots of little tiny movements left and right on the wheel. That's not how people
Hmm.
drive.
Hmm. I beg your pardon. That is exactly how I drive. I have been learning how to drive, and I find myself making lots of tiny little movements on the wheel.
Oh, okay. Well,
It's
maybe,
because I am a terrible driver.
yeah, maybe the Wisconsin roads are a little wobblier than the ones I'm used to. Um, but I mean, that's one of my favorite jokes in Barb and Star Go to Vista Del Mar,
Yes.
where they
Yes.
call that out. Um, but I'm just like, no, no, no. That's just so that's the kind of stuff I was focusing on because the monologue is so.
It's so droning. And it's again, it's this nonsense about because Chris is like, I got attacked by a bear. And it's like this, why would you lie? But it doesn't matter. And
Yeah.
then the woman who picks her up is like, there are bears around here. Let me tell you about the bears around here. And it's just like this elaborate, like we hear more words in this section of the movie than the rest of the movie put together. Again, about her brother getting attacked by a bear. And it's like, is this her like is the bear a metaphor? And you're pointing out, yeah, it's about like, are we animals? But it's like, is that her way of saying like, oh yeah, there are bears. Like I got attacked by a bear too. And it's like, is it like code for we know that Johnny's in these woods? Like I don't fucking even know what's going on.
Yeah.
I
Um,
I will say, unless you have more thoughts,
no, I wish to never think about this again.
I think it rallies at the tiniest bit when in a sort of telling bit of self-awareness, the woman realizes that Chris has passed out during this monologue.
As we all wish we could.
And so there's this moment where she glances down and sees like the horrible jutting bone coming out of Chris's ankle or whatever the hell that exactly is going on. And there's this last little moment where she pulls the truck over to the side to kind of rouse Chris and get her like to stop bleeding out in the truck. And that moment almost worked. It worked
Yeah.
relatively compared to the just absolute catastrophe
Yes.
of the monologue.
Yeah, I think that moment works, and the idea that we're still in the woods, and the woman doesn't understand the stakes because you have not explained them to her. Um, so your choice. Um, and like, is Johnny gonna pop out of the woods, and where is he? And he's just now this kind of like elemental spirit of death in the woods, or
Yeah.
whatever, because he has collected the necklace we see, and he is still haunting the woods because he was not his spirit has not been rebanished beneath the fire tower as it needs to be in order for him to be laid back to rest.
Oh, see, I took it to be that his spirit had been banished back to the earth beneath the fire tower, but maybe you picked up a cue I was at that point not looking to find.
No, because like the ranger guy at least said that you need to like take him to the fire tower and you need
That's
to
true.
bury him
That's
and
true.
put this necklace here,
And
and they didn't do
and
it.
we know that In a Violent Nature 2 is in development,
Sure is.
which the in a way there is nothing to me that reveals the intellectual hollowness of In a Violent Nature more thoroughly than the knowledge that Chris Nash had a sequel on deck.
Yeah. You're like, what on earth could that be?
The only thing that could possibly make it interesting, and it's been announced as In a Violent Nature 2, if it turns out to actually be called like In a Violent Nature 4 or something and just leaps
Ooh,
on ahead, then we might have something.
that would be cool. Okay, I'm on board if that happens. I mean, I'm gonna watch it either
I
way.
don't
It
think it
won't
will because
happen.
I
It
don't
won't.
think he's actually that clever.
No, maybe he'll listen. I don't know. Anyway, that's
Chris Nash, if you're listening and you still have any care at all for what I've said after I
eh,
just said some very terrible things about you, I have a good hook for your sequel.
yeah, and no more monologues, please.
Please.
Like, you can bring back Lord Marie Taylor by all means, but just do another pass. um. Anyway, yeah, I think I'm tapped out on In a Violent Nature. How about you?
Oh man, I was really disappointed. I've been looking forward to this movie. I missed seeing it in theaters because the summer was just an absolute clusterfuck for me, and it
Hmm.
remains a clusterfuck. But I was really excited for this because like slow cinema slasher, hell yeah, that sounds like me. And I'd had such success with Skinamarink, which was structuralist film horror, and it's like, oh wow, all of my favorite like art films being jammed into genre. That's going to work out really well. So I wanted to like this movie. It's why I picked this movie for Friday the 13th Exploitation Month, and it was such a bummer.
I'm
And I'm
so
so
sorry.
mad. I'm so mad at this movie.
Well, I'm glad we both had a chance to watch it. It's a movie that's been on my to watch list, and I also have not been able to get to. So this was a nice time. For me, I'm sorry it was disappointing,
Yeah,
but it is what it is.
it is what it is. I think that it's on me. Like it is not the film's fault that I am so disappointed because the film was obviously going to be what it is.
Yeah, probably. Anyway,
But no, I got no other thoughts. I'm ready to bury this body.
yeah, no worries. Yeah, so that's gonna be that on In a Violent Nature. We're recording this a little early, so I don't actually know what we are doing for October yet. But keep an ear to the ground. We'll let you know when we know. But until then, we'll catch you on the flippity flop, and bye bye.
She ate me.